and I'm moving. All right. Signs of life. So, it says, this is what it says. This, our sages said, you see the line? It begins with Maimar Rizal, it's an abbreviation. Mm-hmm. This is what our sages said. HaKadosh Baruch Hu yeshiv v'esik b'Torah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sits down, a metaphor for brings himself down. Right? The Torah is rooted way deep in him, but the expression of the Torah, and that one can learn it and be occupied with it, even Hashem himself, who gets occupied and learns Torah, is a lower expression. Yoshev, he comes down. It's like the metaphor that's brought a lot in Chassidus is letters. Letters are rooted deep in consciousness, but they go through gradations, phases to come actually out of the mouth. So the Torah shel Baal Peh, I mean, that means, the Gemara, but it means also, Al Pi Chassidus, the Torah as it comes out of the mouth versus the Torah as it's in God's thought, or the Torah as it's in his, even before, it's deeper than his thought. So he's Yeshiv, he comes down, he lowers himself and occupies himself in Torah. Pirish, which means, Atzmusi is Bada Kodesh Umuvdal. They explain the whole thing. God's essence is Kodesh Umuvdal. It's separate. Elisha Yeshiv, but this essence itself comes down. And Yeshiv Umashvilas Atzmo. And he sits, he lowers himself. Lies Mislabish B'Torah. So his essence per se is always with him and only with him. But even as it is still only with him, this is a little difficult perhaps to understand, because we're not like this, right? When we have an essence also, a deep part of our soul, and when we express a word, sometimes the essence goes with it. It's interesting now that I think of it. The more poetic, the more it's like poetry, the more essence is expressed. The more it's like a dissertation on something of biology, the less essence is expressed. But Hashem, since he's always everywhere, even when he's Kodesh and Muvdal, so when he expresses himself, something of his essence is embedded in everything that comes out of him. Just like a person, when a person moves from standing to sitting, the whole person is still there. So when God moves from his depths of the deep consciousness to more external consciousness, Torah, and then more external consciousness, the physical things of this world, he's there, but he's just expressing himself in lowered ways.
Someone asked a question on Facebook. Where does the concept of calling a teacher a Rebbe after their city, Lubavitch, or a book they wrote, Balatanya, or Amida, Chayza Milublin, and why some are called Rebbe and some are called and some not, like the Baal Shem Tov or Chayza Milublin or Elimelech from Lezhensk, who was not the Lezhensk Rebbe. So where does this concept come from?
Well, he's got a few questions there. We didn't ask one. We haven't seen a Rebbe and a Rav. We use them very differently. We have a Rebbe in Yeshiva, and we have a Rebbe who's the tzaddik, right? And we have Moshe Rabbeinu, who is a Rebbe. So Rebbe sometimes connotes something like very special like a tzaddik is a Rebbe. And then it also has a connotation of just a teacher. Moshe Rabbeinu. Rabbeinu. What does it mean? Our teacher. Now, whether a Rebbe gets called by the name of the place, now the Alter Rebbe is not called by the name of the place, right?
Right.
And the other, Elimelech is...
He is, which bears on the Adi.
No, but when you call him Rebbe, right?
He's mostly known as like the Rav or the Alter Rebbe.
Yeah. Unlike Elimelech from Umlensk, who he gets, that seems to his location goes with it. I can't answer why. I don't know.
The Baal Shem Tov.
No, Shem Tov.
I mean,
what do we call the Baal Shem Tov?
I mean, once the dynasty was established, like before the previous Rebbe was the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So it's just
so he's called the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Yes, he is. But the Baal Shem Tov is not called the Baal Shem Tov of...
the Mitzvah Rebbe was in
The Mitzvah Rebbe was already
but also in some groups, they used interchangeable, like in Satmar.
or Babov, Rebbe and Rav, until the new Babov split, but Rebbe and Rav is the same person. In Babov, they don't call the Rebbe, the previous Babov, they don't call him the Babov the Rebbe, but they call, a lot of people call him the Babov the Ruv.
The Ruv. And then they call him, do they call him Rebbe when he becomes Rebbe, or he just stays?
No, I'm saying it's the same.
The Satna Rebbe, Rabbi Avi was called the Satna Ruv.
Correct.
Yeah, it wasn't called the Satna Rebbe.
And it was more of like the Hungarian Galicia area.
I don't know. I really can't answer those questions after all this, but it's interesting.
I think, from what I remember also, even just having, like, certain last names only came about once people, like, once things got so big and so spread out. And usually the last name or anything was associated with what you did, or your family did, or what your family was known for, so...
Or your location.
Right.
Or your location, right.
All of which goes to our topic, though. The name expresses something about something, meaning something important. Okay. The name expresses something important. And this name, of course, is not the person. It's not just a tag. Back to our discussion about names given to children, at a bris, or at the time when a young woman is called up to the Torah, when the name is announced. This is a name that reverberates and comes from heaven, and it indicates qualities of the people. However, it's just a ha'ora. It isn't the person. It's a ha'ora, a ray from the person, and this ha'ora is called b'chinas shem. It's called a name. She'enu ziva ha'ora, which is just irradiation, a flow of something from the essence. It's not the essence of it's a descriptor of the essence. If you take the name Avraham, for instance, Chassidus and Kabbalah take it apart. Ever Ma, Avraham. Avraham is someone who all of Ma is in Kabbalah talk is a name of God. It's the Shem Ma, which indicates bittul, total bittul. And Avraham was someone, all of his evorim, all of his limbs were totally nullified to service of God. Moshe, Minamayim Shisuhu, he was drawn out from the water. So the name that's given to it in Lashon HaKodesh, in the holy tongue, expresses something that's essentially connected with the person, but the name itself is just a ray, an illumination of that. So we said, right, you are he, before the world was created, and you are the same he after the world was created. And we say, but before the world was created, there was just he and his name. So as we were saying, the Alter Rebbe will now say, what does it mean? As we said, on the one hand, name is just appropriate and necessary so people can call you, but on the other hand, it's an expression of who you really are in essence. So there was only he and his name. Hainu, meaning what? This name that was only when he was alone, before he actually expressed himself, refers to the root and the source of this energy that will come out of him, but before it comes out of him, as it's rooted in the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, sheyochel liyasgila, and is able to come to revelation in a manner of a ziva ha'ora. Shiyim imenu his havas olamis, which from that energy, which is hidden deep in his essence, the expression of that has the power to bring worlds into existence. Sheyala b'chetzi b'ratzoynai, that the world should go according to God's desire. Ukamoy ziva shemesh, like the ray which comes from the sun, when that ray is kolo b'ma'or, when it's included in the sun, which is the shemesh atzma. So the sun, one of the reasons this is such a good mashal, the sun is designed to irradiate. If you were on the sun, you wouldn't be experiencing radiation. You'd experience tremendous heat, and you would be utterly destroyed by it. But its goal, its role, is to illuminate. So that heat and that fire is designed to come out in lesser and lesser intensities so they can give life. So, in a similar but different way, God himself, the notion of creation is embedded deep inside of him. When it comes out, then and that's who Shmo Bilvad. Shmo is going to be an effusion from him, but in essence it's deep, and it comes out. So we're getting to the difference between Shmo HaGadol and Shmo HaKadosh. Right? We're beginning to see it. The big name and the small name. The essential name as it is within, the big name, and the small name as it comes out. Huh?
This week is Shmos.
This week is Shmos.
Ah,
Good, very
there we
nice.
go.
Shmos. Names. Hi, Doreen. Hi. I'm going to move down to this bracket down here, but before I do, let's pause. And what's on anybody's mind or questions people have? Any questions on your screen?
Nope, just that one.
Just that one. That's sociological.
Anybody want hot water?
That's a good idea.
Okay, so 5 lines from the bottom. Zehu inin shmei hagadol. This is God's great name. Doreen, if you're looking, it's in the left-hand column. 5 lines from the bottom, there's a bracket. Zehu inin shmei hagadol. This is his great name, right? God has 2 names. We're discussing pairs here. 2 kinds of kalas, 2 kinds of chasonim, 2 levels of names. This is the big name. Shelamayla min histalshelos. This is the name that's deeper than, and I always translate this word lamayla and lamata as deeper than, because there is no higher and low. Higher and low refer to place, and before and after refer to time. And when Chassidus uses the word lamayla min histalshelos, it means above time and place, deeper than time and place. So there's that great name, who you are, embedded in the depth of who you are, before it becomes expressed. And all of us have a yearning, that's the kala, to express that. There's something deep inside of everybody that needs to be expressed, which is one's essence. And if it isn't expressed, one is not only frustrated, but it can lead to tremendously negative behaviors. Somehow a person has to find a way to express oneself, just like God did. I'm being more anthropomorphic than the Torah is, which is just, we couch God in language of man, right? Because man is created in his image. So if you can say such a thing, kaviyachol, there's a need in God to express himself. Not a need like us, but there's a his being is a being which initially is not revealed, but there's a drive in him to reveal. It's it rose up in his will to create. So similarly, there's something deep in us which rises up in us and wants to be expressed. And if it's not expressed, and it's frustrated and it's cut off, then we have issues.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, then we have issues. V'zehu inyan shmei hagadol. So we all have this shmei hagadol, this great name, this deep essence. But here we're talking about God, which is higher than reason, higher than any expression. Shmei hagadol hu. And that's what we say. We started with this line from davening. Meshubach mofore adeyad b'chinas or it's the Ein Sof. What we are praising when we praise and beautify adeyad infinitely, we're beautifying and praising the Ein Sof, the infinite. V'zeh ki hu levada yisborach yochid umeyuchad. And this is what it means. This is the level of God where he is alone. He is totally united. He has no parts, no differentiations. He's yochid, he's alone, and he's undifferentiated. Ve'ikar chayelomim, and on the contrasting with that, when he comes out of his essence, so to speak, and shows his other name, his shem hakotan, his small name, into the like a drop of water in the ocean, we said. So then that's when he's a melech. A melech comes out and reveals his malchus. Ki histalshelos ha'olam is the whole descent of worlds, ein derech ila v'olah. It's not cause and effect. Now here he's going to differentiate between the way God comes out of himself with another kind of process of one thing evolving from another, which is cause and effect. Right? I throw this pen. Well, you guys can't see, unfortunately. I throw the pen and it causes something, right? The thing bounces, right? And the popcorn pops. That's Ila v'olah. That's cause and effect, right? And there's something, the influence of the causer is embedded now, or is experienced by the affected thing. So he's going to say this. The cause and effect. Yeshini b'ha'ila. The cause actually gets affected. You might see the pen having, it won't work with this pen, a dent or, something. The cause gets affected when it's in a cause and effect relationship. Al yedei, through the hashpah that it gives, through the flow that it gives. Here's one you can really understand. When a teacher relates to a student, the teacher has to be affected. Not only, even before the teacher teaches, the teacher thinks about, at least a good teacher thinks about, what is he going to say or she say that's appropriate for the Talmud, right? So there's one of my teachers, in Minnesota, the famous guy from Minnesota. We all know. I want to say it b'shem Einrei, but I can't at the minute. Right? My teacher said, when you think about speaking, you have a speaking engagement, or you're speaking to someone. Say what they need to hear, not what you need to say. Right? So that's the thinking that goes on in the teacher before he opens or she opens her mouth. So the teacher is already being affected before the teacher gives over the hashpah. So the causer is already changed before that causer has an effect on the affected. Okay.
One more time.
I'll say it in his words. When a Rav gives over to a Talmud, you have to say that the Rav is concentrating on what the Rav is going to give over. So there's already a change in the Rav, in the teacher, before he teaches. And his mind is not free to think about things the way his mind was free before he thought about giving something over. That's the thing by Rav, and that's Seder Histalshus, because he's affected by being involved with an effect.
But can't we say Hashem is above cause and effect?
You got the next line.
Okay.
When it comes to God, we say, you are the same. You are the same before the world was created, and you are the same after the world was created. Bli shum shinui, that's with shalom, without any change. So how does this work? Isn't he the cause of all causes? Right? That's the expression we use about God. The cause of all causes. Well, this is because the source of the life force of worlds is only from his name. It's not from his direct essence touching. He exudes a name, and that name goes on and reverberates in creation. So therefore, there's no shini, there's no change to him. It's only his name, or his name is his malchus. At the level of malchus, there are changes. As he said, name is bechinas malchus. So, hello, and you're deep into this, so I hope you'll be able to catch it.
At least I got to make it for some kids.
Just have a new arrival. All right, let me take this up. Any questions about this little piece? Sometimes the lack of questions means it's so mysterious I don't know what to ask. Yeah, David, you have something? Okay. So then how does God create? Right? He's deep in himself, and the expression that's used in Kabbalah is it rose up in his mind to create. And what did he do? He came even more out of himself, so to speak, from his mind into his so-called brain, seichel, about intellect that has an organ, right, which is the appropriate organ for intellect, which is brain. So we call it his brain, moya. And then it comes from the brain into his mouth. It seems to be going through the same stages that anyone does when you want to express something. You think about it, and you have someone across the table from you, you want to give it over, so you start talking. But when you do that, you have a little bit of thought about how are you going to speak. If you know the person at all, you try to come out with words which are appropriate. But we say God has, when his initial creation is not like that. because he doesn't go through any changes, like the changes we do when I think about what am I going to say to you. I see somebody's face, and I have a reaction to it. I'm now choosing the appropriate words for what do you say to this person? You see this person is in such a mood. I'm changing always. We're always changing when we have interactions with other people. Okay, but when it comes to Hashem, this is a bracket. If you're on page number 2, the first bracket. The Be'emes, in truth, Ki niskav shemei levado. This is an expression from the Torah. Niskav, his name is always with him, held with him. Ve'ein hamshachim v'chinas shemei al yedei ila ve'olam. The things that come from God's name, like the various names that we spoke about earlier. Well, we didn't speak about Shem Havaya, for instance, Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's a very essential name because the name itself, Yud Kei Vav Kei, can be broken into 2 words, Yud Hava, continual bringing into being. That's the name of him, Havaya. And another name is Elokim, and they mean something different. Elokim is a plural. So from singularity to plural, you go from Havaya to Elokim, from singularity to plurality. But nevertheless, when he does that, this is not a cause and effect relationship. She'im came, if so, if it were a cause and effect relationship, since he is infinite, everything would remain infinite. Because infinite is touching something else, and it's passing on that quality. Ella, so how does he get...
Yeah, but not all causes are the same as the effect.
No, he's saying it's not cause and effect, huh? No, but when you give over something, you're giving over something from you, and the receiver has to take it in. So if I'm an Ein Sof, and that's all I am, I can't limit myself, right?
Yeah,
so you're going to have to be able to take in infinite.
Shalom, according to each person's way.
How does each person take in infinity in a different way? If a person is by definition limited, right here I am.
Yeah, but we have to filter ourselves. So the same way Hashem filters himself. You have infinite. He could be a cause.
We're going to talk about how he filters himself.
But he's still a cause.
Yeah, but he's not. You'll see. We'll go further line.
Okay.
He filters himself, right?
Right.
And the big filter is called the tzimtzum.
Mm-hmm.
If it weren't for the tzimtzum, I'll explain. If it weren't for the tzimtzum, there would not be any boundary between infinity and finity.
Right.
If without for that, so if he just bump,
there would be nothing finite.
It would be all infinite.
Right.
It would be all infinite, right? Okay, you got it. That's the solving the problem. And what? Because just a little ahead of the game. His being created is not in this bump, cause and effect. This thing hits that thing and it spills over the water on the table, right? No, it's not like that. He's not passing on himself, which is infinite, because if he did, everything would be infinite. So he does this magic, this thing called tzimtzum. This is totally like one of the big ideas, if you would say such a thing, in Kabbalah. That through the way that Hashem creates, is he has to create something that's totally unlike him, that has not infinite, that isn't infinite, yet he's going to invest himself in it. One of the clearest examples to me of that is the Torah. Why do I pick that? Because there's a lot of Chassidus written about the first word of the Torah, of the Ten Commandments, not the Chumash, at Matan Torah, when the Torah was given, and we have heard this before. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. I am Hashem your God. And the word Anoichi is understood from way back to be a Rosh Tevis, an acronym for 4 words. The Aleph is Ani, I, Nafshi, not myself, Yahaves, Kas Yahaves, and wrote myself and gave Yahaves and Yahaves, and gave myself into it. So the infinite God, gave infinity in a package. I packaged infinity in something finite. That's a big deal. That doesn't compute. You know what I mean? How do you package infinity in finite? There are 2 opposites out there. So they can't. That's why we said it can't be cause and effect, because it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. You need something very special, which is called the tzimtzum. The tzimtzum, in many places considered, after explaining the tzimtzum, the Rebbeim would say, either Dilemaven, which is it's easy to understand, or we don't really understand it at all.
I'm not understanding the comparison because a teacher has a certain level of knowledge above a student, right? That's why they're the teacher and the student is the student usually. And even the teacher has to understand the student, and like we say, like
Right. Right.
And the teacher has to funnel their knowledge into a way that the student can understand. How is that not any different than we were talking about cause and effect between a teacher and a student, and the same way Hashem is with us?
Because in the Tzimtzum, this is the paradox of the Tzimtzum. What you explain is a very natural thing. I'm going to diminish myself a little bit. Right? I'm not. If I'm Einstein explaining physics to a sixth grader, I've got to really go through some changes in my head to figure out how I'm going to do that. So there's a big change by me. So one thing we know about Hashem, Ani Hashem Leshanisi.
You're not changing your knowledge. You're changing the way you're giving over your knowledge.
That's the way I'm changing the way I'm giving it over.
Right, but his knowledge
I just said
stays
there's
the
a change in my knowledge. There's a change in the way I deliver the knowledge.
Right.
My words are different. Everything is different. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is different. Has to come down to this level. And included there, when I do that, there isn't everything. If you understand that water, when you boil water, the higher you boil it, the higher you heat it, it's going to boil. So you understand there's a boiling point. You don't understand yet anything about the physics of that. You just understand that that's true. Mm-hmm. And that's all I want to tell you today. First day in class. I just want to tell you that there's that 212 degrees water boils, and that's an interesting physical phenomenon.
Whatever your
why it boils,
the water's still going to boil.
My point isn't the temperature. My point is, why does it boil? I haven't told you. You haven't got anything about it, right? You haven't got anything about the essence of the thing at all. In the Tzimtzum, Hashem passes his essence through a contraction. He doesn't make the teaching smaller and smaller and smaller. Otherwise, the Torah would just be another interesting book of philosophy. Everything comes from God, right? Right. Even secular wisdom comes from God. The Chachamim themselves said, if you meet a guy, a non-Jew, and he says, there's Chachma amongst the Jews, there's wisdom amongst the non-Jews, believe him. The Torah says that. But if he says there's Torah amongst the Jews, don't believe him. Because Torah is a different phenomenon.
Torah amongst the non-Jews.
Huh?
You meant Torah amongst the non-Jews.
Torah what?
Amongst the non-Jews. You said Torah amongst the Jews.
No, I meant the non-Jews. Yeah, the non-Jews, right. There is Chachma. And Chachma, all Chachmas come from Torah. Everything comes from Hashem. Right? Everything comes from Hashem. But Torah...
Even that's an exaggeration because you have the Christians who base everything off the Bible, the Old Testament,
What's your point?
How is that a phenomenon?
What is that? What do you mean, how is it a phenomenon?
What was the expression that you said?
The expression from Chazal is, if a non-Jew says, if a non-Jew says there's wisdom amongst the non-Jews, believe him. If he says there's Torah amongst the non-Jews, don't believe him. Because Torah is a phenomenon that's unique. Essence of God is being passed into infinity, is being passed into finitude. It's not just a lower explanation, like there's a boiling point, but you don't understand physics. Everything every nakuda of the Torah is full of God Himself.
They might be imitating the Torah, but they're not.
They're not
the source of it.
Okay.
They're copying ours.
Every letter of the Torah. Right?
Okay, got it.
All right? Every letter of the Torah is full of God. Now that's a phenomenon that comes through, not through cause and effect. It comes through what's called tzimtzum. And it's called dilur. It's called a jump. Loosely translated, it's a quantum leap. You know what a quantum leap is? Do I know what a quantum leap is? No. But I've read about it and I can describe it. If you were to jump up in the air, I could follow your path, right? In a quantum leap, you can't follow the path. In no change of time, it exists in this place and then another place. It boggles the mind. Everything we're experiencing is in the domain of time. Right? It takes time for you to jump from the ground up 10 feet. They've observed phenomena at the atomic and subatomic level where an electron is in this place and that with no time passed. That's a rough approximation of divinity.
Would that be like comparable to like the Rebbe writing a letter to someone and it getting completely lost and it arriving by then exactly when it needs to be?
There's a
like
story
without it be like the Rebbe didn't put a time, like it wasn't like.
I remember an early story here when I first came here, which blew my head, and then it's on this theme. It's hosted in Europe. When the time of the Frierdiker Rebbe, he was in Europe, and the Frierdiker Rebbe was here, and many Hasidim were separated from the Rebbe, and he was having a tough day. I don't remember the circumstance, or even if they were told in the story. Having a rough day, and he picked up a shoe and he threw it against the wall, and it happened to hit a picture of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And then years later, you know the story. Years later, when he did come to America, and he met the Frierdiker Rebbe, without saying anything, as he passed by, the Frierdiker Rebbe said, "It still hurts."
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So these are phenomena.
Was it the Frierdiker Rebbe?
That's how I remember.
Wow.
Either way, the story's true.
Yeah.
I think you're going to tell a different story. It's a
Okay,
story-
go. Let's put the mic by you. Tell the story.
At the beginning of the Holocaust, when the Germans were invading, so someone went to the Rebbe and he asked them what they should do. He wasn't sure. So the Rebbe said, "So send a telegram to the Frierdiker Rebbe." Well, he wasn't the Frierdiker Rebbe. Then send a telegram to the Rebbe. And the guy said, I don't remember the story, but he couldn't send a telegram. The Rebbe said, "Go send it, because the telegram doesn't have to be sent to arrive. The Rebbe doesn't have to get it, and you don't have to get his answer."
Right. Right.
And then right afterwards, the person felt very strongly about making a certain decision.
So that's it. That's the difference, right? That's a good way of describing the difference
That's
between
something again.
a teacher and the divine, the tzimtzum.
Okay.
Okay? So he creates, not like a teacher giving and designing everything at a lower level, but he takes infinity and he puts it in the kamman. Al yidei tzimtzum, v'dila, which is a jump. That's why I get the quantum leap, the jump. Until the essence is drawn into a line, a string, which brings up string theory, which I won't talk to at all. But it's interesting, jump, leap and string are over here. Memalchus the Ein Sof. So the essence becomes stringed out, not strung out, but in a string. Memalchus the Ein Sof, from the level which is called Malchus of Infinity.
It's 9:30.
V'oid,
It's 9:30.
It's 9:30. That's the alarm. We promised an hour.
And sure, it's 21:30.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to just reach to the end of a topic here.
What
Okay.
is Malchus of?
Malchus of Ein Sof. Okay. I don't know. Then we're going to eat it up with that. That's okay. All right. First of all, everyone knows what Malchus is?
It's like the most, it's the highest.
No, Malchus is actually the lowest of the 10 spheres.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
there's the
okay.
highest, right?
The lowest
But
of the 10
there's the
spheres.
low of each level of each
'Cause
sphere.
Is
So
Keter the highest?
Keter
Kesser is the highest.
So I thought Malchut because I
But you're
compared
right,
the
though.
Malchut to the crown.
Yeah.
So
But
that's
now when you
nice.
mention Kesser, you become right. Because Malchus of the bottom of the top, Malchus of the top sphere becomes the crown of the lowest sphere. So it's the top of the world below. So good. So Malchus. Malchus is Hashem's kingship. He is expressing kingship. But what you have to get used to is everything that comes from Hashem goes through a process of coming down, level after level after level. So let me give an example. I'll give an example from recent Tanya. Letters. When I write a letter with a pen, so that's a very physical expression of where did that letter come from? It didn't come from my hand. My hand doesn't manufacture, nor the pen. These things don't manufacture letters. They're just instruments by which we can describe a letter, right? The letter comes from somewhere else, right? The letter, well, where actually did these letters come from? Well, if I'm writing, the external expression is the pen. If I'm speaking, the external expression is my mouth. But they didn't come from my mouth. My mouth is just an instrument, right? So we refer to Malchus as Malchus Peh, it's the Zohar. Malchus Peh Torah Shebal Peh. Malchus is the mouth, and it's called the oral Torah. So Malchus, okay. But it has a source. It has a source deeper than that. like letters. Go back to the letters. Where are the letters? The letters have a source. If I didn't have an active and useful brain, I couldn't speak any letters at all. So I have in my brain a koyach hamadaber, a power to speak. That power to speak also has letters, but they're not in any way the same. They're not tangible letters. They're intellectual, mental letters, right? But I'll tell you something that's very interesting, that in this day and age of technology, there are, what you saw it with, I think actually Chris didn't show you his kids learning at the computer with a headset around their head?
He didn't show, she
But he
didn't show
told
me,
you
but he
about
told us
it, right.
about it.
But there are devices now you can put on your head and think to the screen
And it could also read your dreams.
and read your dreams. Okay, now do that.
Yeah.
Think to the screen. Now, how is that possible? The physics of it, I don't understand at all. I've never looked into it. But it could only be possible if letters exist, albeit in a very rarefied way, in the head. Right?
Wow.
Now, the head itself has deeper than that. Where does the brain goes back to the mind? And now, once you're talking mind, you're talking more spiritual than physical. People wrestle with defining what is the mind? Right?
Consciousness.
The brain.
What is consciousness?
What are concepts?
Consciousness.
What is consciousness? Right? Okay, so now we go back. We got words. We got malchus coming out of the mouth. We got malchus in the brain. We got malchus in the seichel. The seichel comes deeper than that. So this is the letters of it. What was the expression we were explaining here? Malchus to Ein Sof.
Yeah.
Malchus to Ein Sof is the letters, the power of speech as it exists back in its origin in the infinite mind.
So is this where there first originated, the idea of lettering?
Yes, in the mind of God. And on our letters, there's a whole parak in Tanya about Ha'oisius. It starts with Ha'oisius. And it's a big Yiddish. It's a big novelty to people who, like myself when I first read it. Letters precede everything. They're way back deep in, when it rose up in God's will to create. There's already the beginning of the emergence of letters.
And specifically, it arose here in Malchus, the Ein Sof.
He wrote here Malchus Ein Sof, right? Where was it? Malchus Ein Sof. So we're talking about coming out from the existential essence into the more external attributes of reality. And the metaphor here is a beam and a string, and that's where from Malchus Ein Sof. It's an extrusion from the deepest levels of God consciousness into actual speech. And this is the tzimtzum. And there are many, many tzimtzumim. Many, many tzimtzumim by which infinity gets put in a box, which, as I say, is a paradox. But God, one of the expressions that the Kabbalists use to describe what God is called hasovel hafachim, the one who's able to carry paradox. By him, hafachim, opposites, right? Hafachim. By him, opposites have no opposite. There are no opposites. They're all part of him. Him. All right. So that's it. That is sovel hafachim. And it goes through many, many tzimtzumim, and through the tzimtzumim, the opposites emerge, good and evil, hot and cold, chesed and gevurah, but they're all rooted in a unity in Him. And the only and in each one of them, chesed and gevurah, good and evil, divinity exists. Nothing can exist without divine energy. So how does that happen? Through the tzimtzum. The tzimtzum is the beginning, and then after the tzimtzum, you have what are called parsois, curtains and coverings, which make divine energy even more and more hidden until divinity appears totally darkened into what we call the sitra achra, the other side. The other side also gets its life from divinity, because nothing can exist without the energy of Hashem in it. But just tzimtzum after tzimtzum and covering after covering, until you get, and there are many of these ad ein mispur without any counting. And in the interest of our commitment to time, we're going to have to stop. I think we have one more shot before.
Dalit is on Tuesday, no?
Is it Tuesday?
Chaf is Friday.
21,
Chaf is Yosef's birthday.
3.
He was born in the Rambam's Yortzeit.
I told you about Son Chaim is also one.
Yeah.
So that's which day is that?
Self is Friday.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Monday, but,
21, 2, 3, or 4.
Four.
21, 2, 3, 4. Friday, Saturday, it's Tuesday.
Yeah.
So is that a good thing?
Well,
Then
Tuesday,
we're
no, we
learning
could do
Tuesday
another
night?
one Tuesday night. Finish this off, no?
What?
We'll finish it off with a chazaka with the.
Okay, that's the question. You want me to? Should I finish? We wanted to learn a whole minor, right? But we didn't.
Is
All
that
right, we'll
actually
decide
possible?
how.
I'll hold tight.
Okay. So what did we do tonight? Just in summary, it's just a shame. We have to go through this next time because he gets to the next part, which is Chassan and Kala. This whole Shir hashirim is about the marriage of God and the Jewish people. It's a song, it's a love song between a Chassan and a Kala. And this whole piece has started to talk about God coming down, right? This whole first part was all about that. And now we're going to talk about the song part of it. The notes that are on top of every letter in the Torah. And so we have to drop.
Wow. That's beautiful.
So we're gonna go through this.
So you know, like
Okay.
before
Rebecca came and
Shabbos,
she has a
before
question.
Shabbos comes in, I see in the Siddur, the Shir Shirim. So my question is, are we supposed to say it? Some
But
people
it's
read
the
it.
Sfardim Siddur,
We
right?
don't. Spartan
Oh,
said.
it's in the
Yes,
Sfardim.
right.
Okay, because I wasn't
When-
sure if I
when-
should or not. I was like, this is for.
Are you sorry?
Yeah.
So then,
Yeah.
that's your minhag.
Do you
no?
daven out of a
That's your-
nusach svart siddur?
It's so funny because my family's Sephardi, but I always went to like Isato, so we always daven like the
Oh, you
Ashkenaz
daven
way.
Ashkenaz?
So it's, I know the Rebbe says.
Well, if you feel that your nusach is svart,
Yeah,
then
but I
it's
mean my
fine.
Siddur, I guess if it's in there, so it's Sephardi.
If you have a rabbi that you speak to, ask the rabbi what
I'm
you should
saying
do.
if it's in the Siddur, you're saying it's only in Sephardi Siddur?
It's only in
Also
the
makes
Sfardim.
sense.
It's a minhag Sfardim,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
I think it's beautiful that they do that.
Thank you. Okay.
Gorgeous.
Well, the Spartan in
So-
general are much closer to the Kabbalistic way of looking at life than the.
We do daven as Sfard. We just don't like.
Yeah, so that it makes sense that I wasn't sure because I didn't put it together.
All right.
My dad's actually in the
Oh yeah, I want to hear. Give me one second. I'm just gonna end this and
No,
then.
it's
It's a cliffhanger. It's a real
Yeah, it's so
cliffhanger.
beautiful. I'm
It's-
so happy I made
classes
it for
be
you.
long?
Hi.
Hi,
What?
I'm so happy that I
No.
met
No,
Naomi.
it's stop the
The
video.
elders.
I was
I'm
meaning to
sorry
do it
you,
before, but I,
Chevra Ahavas
I just
Yisroel
did it
people
late.
with all the stop and start.
So actually,
God willing, will be
I live
better
in
next
Flatbush,
week.
Okay.
but